And I'm going to go ahead and start going through the slides. The link here will be on other slides as well, just not quite as large, but it will be very helpful if you have the link open in another tab, because there will be several things to click on in the slide deck while I'm presenting. And if it's something that you would want to use as you train in your own districts, there's also a link at the end of the slides for you to make your own copy, make a template copy, and then you can remix it and edit it any way that you would like to do so. And I always forget to say that, so I want to go ahead and say it now so I don't forget. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and start moving through the slide deck. And I will pull that form up and just see what kind of responses we have so far. Just a couple of quick questions. And it was actually slide 2 has a link to it, and then you can also click the image and go to that form as well. So I'm going to pull that up, and guess I have to sign in. We get signed out all the time. Sorry about that. Okay. And so let's see, we have 7 responses so far. So I'll give it another minute and see, give everybody else a second to respond. But the link for it is on slide 2. You can click the image or the link there. But if you don't mind taking a moment to respond to that, that will be helpful. And it looks like so far we have about half of us who serve all grade levels, and quite a few multiple grade spans, a few 6 to 8 and a few 3 to 5. So not a whole lot of just specifically high school staff, it looks like. And then for roles, looks like it's coming in at mostly digital learning coaches, a little bit of DPI folks, AIG specialists, school administrator, classroom teachers, and support staff. Okay. And then for self-assessment, it looks like we have one who's an expert, and 3, even though I have my phone on do not disturb, I'm getting a call. Sorry about that. 3 who have a fair amount of knowledge. Most of us are kind of middle of the road. Nobody who has absolutely no experience whatsoever. So that's very helpful to me. I appreciate you filling that in. And so we'll go ahead and start going through the slide deck. And the purpose of this session is to gain an understanding of the need for adapting instruction to adapt to the ubiquitous of generative AI. And that word ubiquitous, I don't think I had ever heard before until Gen AI came out, but now you hear it all the time. But it is a word that really does capture the essence of it, that it is just everywhere, that we can't really avoid it, we can't block it, we can't ban it, because it is in all of the things that we use already and available on all devices, including cell phones. So we have to learn how to adapt our instruction to that. And we need some practical ideas for how to do that. I hear a lot of people saying that you have to adapt your instruction, but the guidance on how to do that has been minimal. And I'm working on developing out more guidance also, which I'll be sharing later on. So today we'll just kind of do part one of that session. And if you don't know me, my name's Vera Cabero, and I am now the Emerging Technologies Consultant for DPI. My contact information is all there on the screen. I do serve statewide in this role. So if you, especially like in leadership circles and groups like that, mostly for teachers, we'll be connecting you with your regional consultant. But if you have needs, you can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to direct you to the right person if it's not something that I can help you with. And so we'll go ahead and get to the objectives today. The why we're doing this is we're talking about why students need to master AI. The world is changing right before our eyes, more vastly than I've ever seen it change in my 55 years. I've been around a while, and it's really changing rapidly, and it is going to force some change in academics and education as well to make sure that our students are prepared. So we're going to talk about also one of the big concerns in education is academic integrity. And so that is going to look different from here on out. It's going to look different when kids come back in August of what it did in May, because things have already changed since then. And so we have to think about how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to manage it. We're going to talk about AI detectors and cheating, how to create AI resistant assignments, how to bring AI to the classroom. And we're going to look at the AI assessment scale that I've created that's in the North Carolina guidelines. And we'll do some practice and work with that. And we'll talk about ethical use and modeling transparency as well. So I'm going to just quickly share the screen. I know if you've seen it in my presentations, you've seen it before, but I like to use it to ground our discussion because it is truer today than it's ever been. And if we keep teaching kids like we've always taught them, that we're really not going to prepare them for tomorrow. And so that is loosely quoted, but there's another quote that I like to share that is by Scott McCloud, and it's an individual I got to meet at ISTE. I'd never met him before. He's done a lot of work around AI and cheating and academic integrity as well. But he kind of points out that ChatGPT really has exposed the frailty of our schooling model and the brittleness of our ability to change and our inability to move beyond factual recall and procedural regurgitation into something that's more relevant and meaningful for our kids. And I think that's something that we're going to need to continue working on, something we've been working on for a while, but we have to consider what skills are really necessary for kids and what skills are they going to need in the world that they're moving into and that they're going to inherit. And so we will have to, I know a lot of us bristle at change. I'm sorry I keep doing that, but we will have to adapt to that. We'll have to figure out how we're going to adapt to it. And this is a slide with a couple of statistics that came out in May, a study from LinkedIn and Microsoft, which really kind of blew me away. And I know a couple of you have seen it before as well, but it really speaks to the need for our students to gain AI literacy and for us to prepare our students for an AI-enabled world, which they're going to live in for the remainder of their lives. And the younger a person is today, the longer they're going to live in that and the more change they're going to see and the more it's going to impact their future. And so this study asked several thousand business people around the world several questions about AI. And this is just two of the statistics that gathered. There were lots more. And there's a link to the bottom. I really encourage you to look at the whole study. But the one on the left, they were asked if they would hire someone without AI skills, and 66% of them said they would not. And again, that's May 2024. That's not, it's not asking them, in 2030, would you hire somebody without AI skills? It was a current study, and that was their current answer. And so that one really blew me away and kind of gave me a renewed vigor and passion for making sure that our students are getting prepared for what they're going into. And the one on the right, the 71%, is the leaders who said they are more likely to hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced candidate without them. And so they are prioritizing AI skills over experience. And for those of us who've worked our whole lives to gain experience, that stings a little. Actually, it stings quite a bit. But it is a reality because AI has the ability to lift up those lower skilled, lower experienced workers and make them much more efficient and effective at their jobs. And so that is a new trend that is in the business world of hiring people who have those AI skills who may not have a lot of experience. And it can do the same thing in our schools as well. AI can help lift up those lower skilled students as well. It can help them potentially more than it can help the other students. So we need to make sure that they're getting equal access to the training about AI and the ability to use AI. And this is just a quote from our superintendent. I listened to a panel that she was on a couple months ago, and I pulled this quote from that panel, but she said that AI literacy is workforce development, and I couldn't agree more. And Superintendent Truitt has done a lot in our state around workforce development, and she sees the importance of it, and that's why she is a big supporter of our guidelines and our work around AI. So that brings us to this slide, and this was from the National Educational Technology Plan, which came out last spring. And we've all been talking for years about the digital divide, the access of internet and computers. And that still is an issue, even though we made a lot of ground on that during the pandemic and getting devices out to students and even improving connectivity in some places. That continues to be an issue. But the other two parts of this really had not been brought to the to the public conscious, in my opinion, very well before the study came out. But they pointed out that we're not just dealing with a design access divide, we're also dealing with a design divide and a use divide. And the design divide is where teachers and educators are given the opportunity to build their own capacity and get high quality training on how to effectively use technology to enable their learning experiences. And then the use divide is about students having those opportunities to explore, create, and engage in critical analysis and use technology in real world and authentic ways. And so those are the two things that we're really concerned with addressing. We still need working on the access divide because it is still an issue. Where I live in particular, there are lots of people who don't have good internet access or devices, but we also need to make sure we're focusing on that, developing the capacity in our educators, and then ensuring that all of our students equally get access to the abilities to use the technology. And I'm really concerned with that one, that we do consider that in that one, that we really are bringing these opportunities to everyone. I have had experiences before in computer science where I was teaching elementary school students computer science, but it was only a pull-out AIG group. And I don't want to see that happen with AI, because if we only offer opportunities to use AI to our AP students and our advanced level students and in computer science, if it's siloed in those ways, we will potentially increase the digital divide, because those students who rely on schools for their access won't have the opportunity to learn it, and they're going to go compete against those jobs that we just talked about from that Microsoft study, and they're going to be at a greater disadvantage than they were previously. And so we need to make sure that we're spreading these opportunities equally to all students. And this is one more quote I wanted to share about cheating from Dan Fitzpatrick, who is the AI educator. And he said that if using AI is cheating, then cheating is a skill. And that's a different way of thinking about it than a lot of our educators are thinking about it. But we need to shift those mindsets, because it really is a skill that will help them propel their careers and prepare them for the future. And it's a skill we really can't ignore. And if it's cheating, I'd have to say I've done an awful lot of cheating the last few months, and I would say many on the call have as well. And so we need to shift that mindset in the classroom also, away from this dichotomy of using AI is always bad, and if they use AI, they cheated, because that's not a real world scenario in the world that we live in now and that they'll live in. And so I do want to address AI detectors, because this session is about adapting instruction. And unfortunately, that is one thing that a lot of people have gone to in search for a solution to the problem of students using AI, what they foresee as a problem. But that is not a solution. It's not an equitable solution or an effective solution. And there's a lot of research that will follow, that will back that up. And I've linked some of those on this slide. But those AI detectors, first of all, are not nearly as accurate as they will have you believe. If you have a meeting with one of their sales folks, they'll have you believing that it is the answer to your problem and it will catch all the cheating and that nobody will get away with cheating. And that's just not the reality of the situation. And with the current technology, the way they work currently, I don't think it ever will be, because the AI technology itself is evolving far too quickly for them to keep up. Now, there has been some talk recently of a different kind of technology that OpenAI is working on, that is a watermarking technology that may potentially work better. But even if they do release it, which they are not releasing it because of the controversy around it, but even if they do release it, it's only going to work if a student uses ChatGPT, and a student could bypass that just by using any one of the hundreds of other AI-enabled apps out there. And so I really don't think an AI detector is ever going to be a solution to this issue. And this graphic from Holly Clark has pointed out very succinctly a lot of the concerns with them. And one of them there at the top is there is a high frequency of false positives, and they will tell you that it's 95% accurate, or some of them maybe slightly less, but that's not really true. But even if it were, that means that potentially 5 students out of every 100 students is falsely accused of cheating. And since we are dealing with human beings and young human beings with fragile feelings and fragile emotions, that's a number that I can't live with. And I don't think as educators we should be able to live with that 5 students might be falsely accused and not have any recourse for proving that they indeed did not cheat. But another thing that is not really addressed on this graphic is that the number of false negatives is far greater. The students that are able to fool the AI detectors and get by with cheating without anybody knowing it is much larger. And any student can go on to TikTok or any one of their social medias and search for videos on how to beat an AI detectors, and they will get hundreds of videos with all kinds of tips and tricks, and they will all work. So it's as simple as just asking the LLM to write like a 10th grader, or add a couple of spelling errors and a run-on sentence or something like that, or taking the output yourself and editing it so that it sounds more like your voice. Both of those things will indeed fool these AI detectors. And I'll show you a slide in a minute that shows you, they call those adversarial techniques, but I'll show you how they do affect it. But it's also a lot of unnecessary work for teachers, because if it's done correctly, the teacher is still going to read the student's work, and then they're going to feed it into an AI detector, and then they're going to look at the AI detector's response, and they're going to evaluate it against the student's work, which adds to the load of the teacher. And if the teacher is not reading the work, then we have a real problem, because if it's only being fed into a detector and they're using that response as the final answer, that is a concern. And I actually heard of that happening at a community college a couple of months ago, where a professor assigned a 0 to a student's paper, and then the student came back and said, I did not use AI. And he said, well, I guess I better read the paper then. And so that brings a lot of concerns to the forefront there. We need to make sure we have that human oversight. But it's also, they have a lot of lack of transparency about how they work. And that concerns me also, because if teachers are using these, they're feeding student work into those models without those students' permissions, without releasing permission to feed it in there. And they're using those student work to train their models. And so that brings up some privacy concerns and some copyright concerns. And they're not transparent about what they're doing with the student work that's fed into them. But another big concern with them is they are discriminatory against non-native English speakers, and that has been proven in multiple studies, that it will falsely flag them as AI detected at a higher frequency than native English speakers. And a big one for me, the next one, is it promotes a false assumption that using AI is bad, which again, that's a mentality that we have to move away from. And on the left, it's got some ideas about what to do instead, which I think is very important. Having conversations with your students about appropriate use. AI literacy is our number one defense against all of the bad and ugly effects of AI. Teaching our students how to use it appropriately, and teaching them about the benefits and the concerns, is the best defense. And we've been here before. This is not the first time we've had to deal with that. I am so old that I was teaching in the late 90s and the early 2000s, when we were dealing with the advent of the internet, and we had a lot of the same conversations. We were worried about students going onto the internet and just copying and pasting into their documents and claiming it as their own. And they did that, and they still do. But we had to teach them how to do it appropriately, because we knew that they needed to know how to use the internet, because it was going to be a big part of their future. And we had about 30 years to adapt to the internet, about 3 decades before it was mainstream. But AI, of course, it's been less than 2 years, and it's been mainstream for a long time. So we've had much less time to adapt, but in a lot of ways, there are a lot of similarities. We also recommend collecting writing samples throughout the year. I will say that I've heard some people say, I'm just going to go to all pen and paper, and that is not the right approach. if you do that, first of all, there's some accessibility concerns with that for students who can't write and have accessibility issues. But secondly, you're preparing them to graduate into 1985, but you're not preparing them to graduate in 2025 if you have them always writing everything and they're not using technology and not learning how to use AI. But also capturing their reflections on their collaboration and on the process of learning, and thinking about AI as a partner in all writing and all work. Think of it as a tutor, because no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what you block, no matter what you ban, where the reality is there are some students who can and probably will use AI on the tool, on the work. And then having students share about how much was used, disclose the use of AI. And we're going to talk about all those things a little bit more as we go forward. I do want to pause for a moment and just see if we have any questions or anything. Take a look at the chat. I have not had it open, so I want to see if we have anybody who has any questions, or if anybody wants to discuss anything I've said so far before we move forward. I don't see anything in the chat. And we're a small enough group. If anybody wants to come off mute, that's certainly just fine to do that. Or if you want to type something in the chat. If not, I'll wait about 30 more seconds and we'll move forward. While we're doing so, there is a chart on the screen that you can be digesting a little bit and thinking about the adversarial techniques that we were talking about. Okay, I'm assuming there are no questions, so I'm going to keep going. But this is a chart. There was a very deep study done, and I've linked the whole study at the bottom of the page if you would like to look at it. And there's the study was about adversarial techniques and how they affect the accuracy of generative AI detectors. And as you can see here, it's named several different companies. Some of them you may be familiar with. The purple line is how accurate they were before students introduced adversarial techniques, like some of those that I mentioned, like asking for a student voice, asking for mistakes in it, or correcting it after the fact. And you can see that they're still not as high as they claim, but the green bar indicates after those adversarial techniques were introduced, how much less accurate they were. And they basically were, some of them were practically almost 0%. I mean, they dropped significantly. And so again, some students who know how to prompt and who know how to find out how to beat these things are beating them, and it's going undetected. Okay, so that brings us to another study by Stanford University, which is also linked at the bottom. And Stanford has been for several years studying cheating and concerned with why there's so much cheating going on. And there has been, in recent years, 60 to 70% of students who've admitted to engaging in cheating behavior on a monthly, at least once that month, which is a ridiculously high percentage. But they anticipated that it would increase drastically when they did the study again in 2023 after ChatGPT came out. But they were shocked to find that it had not increased. It was exactly the same. And so I draw the deduction from that cheating is a philosophical issue. It's not a technological issue. And the technology makes it faster and easier to cheat and harder or impossible to detect, but it has not increased the actual incidence of cheating. Probably the same kids who were cheating before are still cheating. Same ones who were not are not anymore. And so we have to think about why kids are cheating. Sometimes it's just they're struggling and they need extra help. AI can help with that, but we've got to teach them how to use it as an assistant, as an enhancer, not to do the work for them. Some of them have just external obligations. Every student doesn't go home to a happy family where they just sit at home and play board games at night and have parents helping them with homework. Students have different life experiences, and some of them don't have the time for various reasons, working, family obligations. Some of them may not even know where they're sleeping that night. And so that's a concern. But also sometimes it's just because the assignments we give feel like pointless busy work. And I know I was a teacher for 14 years, and it stings to say it, but I know that sometimes I gave pointless busy work because teaching is overwhelming. And sometimes you're just trying to get through the day and keep them from throwing pencils at each other during class or whatever. And sometimes we're all probably guilty of that. And sometimes they're overwhelmed by the pressure to achieve. And so, how do we remedy that in the age of AI? One of the big, just that overlying thought is that we need to start looking at the process of learning as more important than the product of learning. And so the end product in any situation can be pretty easily cheated now, especially if it is a written assignment. The students can almost always plug it into ChatGPT and get a response. And so instead, we need to think about what did they do to arrive at that end result, and what did they learn along the way. And so we're going to look at some ideas for doing that. But I also want to kind of encourage everyone to strive for balance. I will never encourage that students are on computers all the time. I've never done that. I will also never encourage that every single day, every single thing you do, students are using AI. That's not an appropriate balance either. But you need to ask yourself when you are assigning an assignment that maybe you've done every year before, if you plug that assignment into ChatGPT, can it respond in just a few seconds with a very plausible response that does a pretty good job of addressing the question? If it does, that assignment does need some modifications. And I'm not saying throw all your assignments out and start from scratch, but there are ways that you can adapt your assignments to help make them more AI resistant. We're going to look at that in a minute. How can you modify it to require more human skills? And what kind of value does it have to the students in their AI rich future? One assignment that I would give almost every year is write an essay on the causes and effects of World War II. Now, in 2025, I would have to ask myself, is that really valuable for a student to do that, to have to write those paragraphs and spit out those facts to me? And I'm not saying writing will not be valuable. Writing will always be valuable. But when they can just readily look up answers, maybe that's not the most valuable assignment. And so I would want to adjust that assignment. And are you providing them ample opportunities to learn about emerging technologies while still teaching the curriculum? We can't just throw our curriculum out, but we need to be teaching it along with allowing opportunities for emerging technologies. And so this is my mantra, that everybody should and can learn about AI before they're ready to learn with AI. And so we do need to make sure that we are infusing AI literacy in the curriculum. And I did a whole session on that a few weeks ago, which unfortunately did not get recorded, or we've lost the recording, so I'll have to redo it. But it's really important that we're making sure that our students are becoming AI literate. And that means they're learning how to understand, use, and evaluate AI systems and ethically participate in a digital world. And so understanding it, they need to know what it is, how it works, and its potential benefits and risk, how to effectively use it, how to evaluate the output. And then they need to be able to actually use the tools to do that. And I did do another session on AI 101 that was recorded, and then a separate session on prompting that was recorded, which kind of dives into that a little more, but we won't have time to do that in today's session. And so we also want to always make sure our students are aware of the limitations and concerns. And there is a session on that also, but just briefly, they need to know that the systems are biased. They need to know how to evaluate them for bias. They need to know the systems can and will make mistakes or hallucinations, that you cannot rely on the outputs 100%. And they need to know, most importantly, how to protect their own privacy and to never input personal identifiable information into the systems. Teachers need to know that as well. And so, as most of our students are not yet engaging with AI in a way that is approved by the schools, we know they're engaging with it, but it's not being done on the school devices, school accounts, school usernames, and all of that. And so we're trying to prevent the use of AI. A first step is to learn how to make our assignments more AI resistant. And the side benefit of that is those assignments will also include more higher order thinking, which has been a concern for education as long as I can remember, that we've been trying to increase the level of thinking of our students. And so AI is in some ways going to force that a little, to move a little faster than it has been. I honestly haven't seen a tremendous amount of movement in that over my 28 years of of education, although I've heard it talked about all 28 years. But this is going to force that, because if not, we are going to always face the risk that students can just do those assignments on AI, and we really can't detect it. And so we've already talked about the process of over product, but what that might look like is having students submit their outlines and their drafts and their notes, evaluating the Google Doc history, document history. And there are lots of other ways too to emphasize the process over the product. When they get to the point where they're using ChatGPT and other tools to create content, having them share their chats is a good way of doing that, and learning how to evaluate the chats. And that's something I'll go into more in the second session that we'll do in a couple of weeks. But another way is just to incorporate personal experiences into the assignment. And that is, of course, much easier in the humanities classes, a little more difficult in math. Everything is a little different with mathematics, but in the humanities, this is actually generally fairly easy to do. Designing tasks that require students to relate personal anecdotes or experiences to the course material. So a scientific concept, for example, like photosynthesis, they could talk about how it affects their life personally on a daily basis. What are things in their life that are impacted by photosynthesis, or whatever other scientific concept you want to talk about. Talking about, I mentioned earlier, the cause and effect of World War II. A way to adapt that assignment to make it more higher order thinking would be to say instead, imagine that the Axis powers had won World War II. How would your life today be different if the Axis powers had won? And you have to name at least 3 things that you do at least on a weekly basis that might not happen at all, or might be different in that situation. So that even if they go to ChatGPT and they ask, hey, who are the Axis powers and what did they stand for? And how might things be different if they had won? They're going to have to take that knowledge and apply it to their own personal experience. And that will require a lot more higher order thinking. And so another way is classroom interaction, which I think we would all agree is something we need to be doing a whole lot more of. Our kids need to be engaging with each other live, in person, face to face, not on devices, not on computers, but putting them on the spot and having them do spontaneous discussions, each one teach one, let the class ask them questions that they have to answer, let the teacher ask them questions they have to answer. And if the learning has taken place, whatever way it happened, and they can answer those questions, that to me is much more important than the end product that they turn in. And oral presentations, debates, and discussions are also great ways to do the same thing. Helps them articulate their understanding in real time. And you can easily tell very quickly whether they have done the learning and done the work or not. Multimedia projects is another great way. Podcasts, videos, other songs, raps, poems, whatever, and then also introducing those evaluative and speculative elements, which I did in that example I just quoted from World War II. Imagine what if this were different, having them speculate on how things might be different, and that really introduces a lot more higher order thinking and critical thinking, which, by the way, those are 2 of the skills that are always coming up. I need to keep my hand off my mouse. I'm sorry. Keep doing that. But those are 2 of the skills that are always coming up as the top skills that people want out of their employees. And that and creativity. Those are and the ability to be able to collaborate and work with others and to communicate your ideas clearly. And so all of these also will help improve all of those skills, which our Portrait of the Graduate also focuses on, as well as our digital learning standards for students, which are the ISTE standards. And so that's a way to kind of weave all of those in and really give them their due, because they all are equally important to any other skill that we teach. So this is that one quote there about thinking from Holly Clark's graphic about just consider everything group work. You may as well think of it that way going forward, especially for your middle school students and high school students. Elementary school students, probably not so much, even though I know a few of them are using AI. It's going to be much more prevalent in high school and, also some in middle school. But we just need to face the fact that it is a tool that they have at their disposal on their phones, on their devices, on their home computers. And so, we have to think about what if that is a silent partner, what task do they need to accomplish? Who's going to do each task? How will they be integrated? How will collaborators hold each other accountable? How will instructors know who did what? How will grades be awarded? And so all of those things you consider when you're assigning collaborative groups. But and this research is from Cornell University, and I've linked it there as well. It's worth reading. It's a very thought-provoking article. And that's the one that kind of got me thinking as I created the graphics that I'm going to show you in a minute about how do we evaluate that when AI is one of those partners. And so I've just linked here also the North Carolina guidelines. I'm not going to open it, but if you're not familiar with it and haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. The graphics that I'm going to show you are in the guidelines, and it actually got a recent update yesterday. And so there are a few new things in the guidelines and noted on the updates page that you might want to check out as well. But this is one of the things that we just added. And I do want to just address it briefly because we do want AI literacy PK to 13. All kids need to be AI literate. We're much more concerned now with our high schoolers, those closest to graduation, and then our middle schoolers who are engaging with digital digital formats, social media, and things like that a lot more, and are potentially going to encounter AI generated content and make bad decisions and things like that. But our elementary school students also need AI literacy. But we don't recommend that our elementary school students are actually learning with or engaging with chatbots. And there's lots of reasons for that. A big one is that they are not yet really capable of evaluating for bias and really understanding and mitigating the bias. And at this point in time, that is an issue. That is something that will be encountered eventually, and they could potentially reinforce stereotypes if they're not carefully evaluating it. But we do recommend in middle school that they are able to start learning with AI when the school's ready to do that. They're not old enough to create accounts on most of the platforms, however. And so there are some student-facing platforms like School AI, Magic School Student, Mizzou, and Phobiz that will allow the teacher to create chatbots and share them with students and then monitor their progress. That could safely be used in middle school. Our high school students, though, really do need to eventually start learning about AI as well as learning with AI. And in high school, eventually, when they first start learning it, those teacher created bots might be good, but eventually they really need to be learning on the real world tools that they will be using when they graduate. And so that was something that was recently added. But this graphic is the first version of the acceptable use scale that was in our guidelines, and I've actually updated it since. So we're going to look more at the next version. But it's something thinking forward when our students start using AI is how do we evaluate who is doing what? How do we evaluate what the student did versus what the chatbot did? And how do we make sure students are correctly disclosing when they use AI? And how do we have a clear communication between teachers and students so that students are clear on what they're allowed to do on an assignment, because we can't, if we don't tell them not to use AI and there's no policy or anything created, is it fair to punish them for using AI? And so a scale such as this is important to kind of lay that groundwork and build common understanding between our faculty and our students so that if a student has an assignment, they can ask, what level is this? The teacher can say 0, and they know that means I can't use AI. Or the teacher might say 3, you can use AI for this, this, and this, and so forth. But we did update that recently to a little bit more simplified scale with 0, 1, 2, and then an infinity level, which is what we're going to talk about today. And we have, let's see what time it is. We still have about 20 minutes, and so we're doing good on time. But I do encourage you to open this scale if you want to. Well, actually, you don't need to open the scale. We'll just look at it on here. There's a tool that we're going to use in a minute that I will ask you to open. But this scale, the 0 level, is still just the AI free. But the 0 level also, as we've discussed, should also be AI resistant, and it should include higher order thinking, because if not, you can't be guaranteed that they're going to be AI free. And so, but on the zero level, the work has to be done without any assistance from AI, and there will always be a place for that. There will never be a place where we will have our students just using AI on everything, and we don't advocate for that. But students would rely entirely on their own knowledge and understanding. Any AI use at that level would be a violation of whatever student academic integrity policy is in place. And a lot of schools are also requiring students to also submit an academic integrity pledge, which is just a simple statement that they did not use AI. And then sometimes, and this is a progression, so that would be the first step is as students are learning to use AI, sometimes they would need to be able to use it as an AI assisted assignment, which they're using it for tasks that are specified by the teacher, like brainstorming, planning, feedback, etc. But at this level, they would not be allowed to include any AI generated content in their final submission. And any use beyond that would be a violation of academic integrity. And at this level, they would need to include a disclosure statement. And in most cases, that is a very simple thing. It's just simply saying, um, I use ChatGPT to help me brainstorm my ideas and then to evaluate my rough drafts. And so you just state what tool you used and how you used it. And we also recommend that they share links to the chats. Most of the large language models out there will allow you to share a link to your chat so that the teacher can evaluate that learning process and see how much the student engaged with the bot and how much they evaluated, what kind of oversight they provided. And so that's a recommendation. If there are tools that you're using that don't allow for the sharing of links, then screenshots will work also. But I will say that if you're using those teacher created tools like School AI and Magic School, the teacher can monitor the chat the whole time anyway. And so that's really not necessary in that case. But then after they have kind of mastered that and they're developed in their AI literacy a little more, it is time, moving on through high school, that they get the opportunity to create AI enhanced assignments. And AI enhanced assignments are much more like the way that we all use AI. If you're a user of AI, this is how you use it every day. You use it for whatever you need to use it for, and you hopefully are constantly monitoring and evaluating and directing and providing that human oversight. So at this level, students can use it interactively throughout an assignment, but they have to provide that human oversight and evaluation of all AI generated content, making sure everything is accurate, there's no bias present, that it is actually serving their purpose. And they need to interact with it and critically engage with it throughout the process, and they're responsible for the fairness and the accuracy of the responses. If they in their final output they put something that is not true because they missed it, then that is their responsibility, not the chatbots. And then they're also required to disclose the use of tools and how they used it. And same thing applies there, sharing a link. Or if you use one of those teacher created tools, the teacher has access to that already. And then finally, we hope that our high school students, as they near graduation, will have some opportunities to use it on an AI empowered level. And the AI empowered level is really kind of like the moonshot thinking, ways that AI can really enhance and empower us to create things that were not possible before. For example, right now, there's a tool called Claude AI that I use frequently and that I can code on, and I can create interactive live things, games and activities with code. And that's a skill that I just never fully developed. There are other tools that allow me to create music and sing, which is other skills that I definitely do not have. And so there are many ways that AI can do that. But more importantly, AI the data sets that are in AI can actually do some really remarkable things to change the world. And I have a lot of examples of those in another session I do called The Good, Bad, and Ugly. But they, like, for example, you might have seen a couple of weeks ago in the Olympics, there was a paraplegic who was able to carry the torch using an AI empowered exoskeleton. There's a congresswoman who is able to speak now, who's lost the ability to speak, but she's able to recreate her own voice using an AI tool called 11 Labs. And there's lots of medical breakthroughs that are happening constantly, agricultural breakthroughs and other environmental breakthroughs with AI. And our students, if given the opportunity to develop the skills, may be the very ones who are able to solve some of those, just perennial problems that we've been dealing with forever using AI, if they're given the opportunity to learn it at that level. And so we're going to go into the hands-on portion of the content now. We have about 15 minutes left, so I want to spend about at least 10 minutes here, and I'm going to demonstrate it for you first, but there is a link on this next screen to a GPT called the Zero to Infinity Assistant. And if you click that link, it will open up in another window. And we're going to actually practice. This is the tool that I created in ChatGPT. It is like a separate little chat bot that is built just for a certain purpose. And this tool I built as an assistant to guide people in using this 0 to infinity scale. And so when it lands on your page, when it opens, you just simply click I'm ready to get started. And I've trained it to, first of all, give you an overview of the 4 levels, which I've already done, so I'm going to skip that. But it'll give you an overview of those 4 levels, and it will also give you an example of each. And then it's going to ask you for some information. And I would like for everybody, if you're comfortable working in another tab or have another screen, to engage with it while we're doing this and kind of create an assignment of your own. But it's going to ask you, first of all, to provide the AI integration level, which is 0, 1, 2, or infinity, the grade level, the subject, the learning objective, and in any other context that you want to give it about your students, your standard course of study. And that's one thing I highly recommend for educators, is to always, if you're trying to teach a particular standard, to always just copy and paste that standard in. Have your standards open in one tab so that you can just quickly copy and paste into it. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. And I'm going to start with 0, which is what I would like everybody to do. I'm just typing 0, a comma, and then I'm going to give the grade level. I'm going to say 8th grade. That was the last grade that I taught. So it's going to be 8th grade. And then the subject matter, I'm going to say social studies. And then the learning objective is, what do I want my students to learn? And I'm going to say, when I taught 8th grade social studies, it was mostly North Carolina focused. And so I'm going to say, how did Native populations in North Carolina contribute to modern society? Okay, and so that's going to be my learning objective. And if I weren't pressed for time, I could go to my standards and actually copy that standard and paste it in, which is what I would recommend. Somebody says, are we supposed to have to create an account? If you don't have a ChatGPT account, you would have to create an account. I'm sorry about that. To use a GPT, you can use ChatGPT without creating an account now, but to use the GPT in ChatGPT, you would have to create a ChatGPT account. Um, so I I didn't think about people not having an account already, so I apologize for that. And so I've got the learning objective, and in other relevant contexts, and again, prompting is really important, learning how to prompt effectively. But my number one prompting tip is add lots of context. Context is everything. The more information you give the model about what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to achieve it for, the better your response is going to be. So I'm going to say it is a mixed ability group, whoops, with a few non-English speakers, several learning disabilities. This was my typical group. I don't know about you, but also some high flyers, I'll just call them. And in other contexts, I want them to focus on collaboration and creativity as well as critical thinking. So you can anything that you want it to focus on, and I would say groups of 3 to 4. You can give it as much context as you want to, but I'm just going to stop right there and I'm going to hit submit. Okay. And as you see, it's going to give me 3 examples of an assignment that will meet that criteria on a 0 level, meaning they're not using any AI at all. And it's going to be group work. So it is first assignment is a collaborative timeline creation where they're working to research, then design, then present. And it has the focus there for me. A cultural fair exhibition, a mini cultural fair where they create an exhibit showcasing different aspects. And then finally, a storytelling through art. And so if I wanted, then it's asking you, do you want to, then it will say, do you want to develop one of these examples further, or would you prefer more options? And so my next number one tip for working with AI models is never just stop with one prompt. You always need to engage the model in conversation and improve the output or get more. And so I'm going to say, I like all 3 and I want to give them a choice. Want to give them a choice. And so I'm going to say, create a student introduction, a student guide, I'll say, that introduces all three, and a simple 4-point rubric to evaluate all 3. And I could also give it the criteria. I could say use the criteria for accuracy, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking, I'll say. So you can give it the criteria or not, but it can do things like that for you. It can give you, if you want a script, like maybe you're gone that day and this is something you want to leave for a substitute, you can say create a script for a substitute. If it were something that had an answer key, you could ask it to create an answer key. And so it's going to give this is a introduction to my students. It's going to spell out all of the assignment choices for them. And then let's see how we do on the rubric. Okay. And so now it's creating a rubric for me. And so since I gave it the criteria, I'm happy with the criteria. And I could ask for corrections on it if I wanted a little more detail in them or I wanted to change something. I could keep engaging with the model and asking for more. Okay. But I don't want to stop at just the 0 level today. Somebody said you can open ChatGPT with Google. You can, but I think you may have had to already create an account. I'm not sure about that, but hopefully everybody is able to get into it. There is a school AI version on one of the slides as well that doesn't work quite as well, but it works pretty well. And so hopefully everybody has had time to work with that. Thank you, Catherine. Please share it. It's open in the chat in the GPT store, so anybody can use it. And it really does help people to kind of start processing this and what this looks like. But the next thing I want to do is move on to the next level. And so I want to say same assignment, level 1, but I've got 8th graders here. And my 8th graders can't use ChatGPT or any of that stuff. And so I want to specify that. I want to give context, or otherwise it's going to tell me, have them use a large language model to do this, that, and the other. So I'm going to say students cannot create AI accounts and can only use school AI chatbots created by me. Okay. And so I want to specify that if I were working with high school, of course, I could say whatever tool they do have access to. But you want to specify that, or it will give you all kinds of ideas that involve using AI that the students will not legally be allowed to use. And so it's going to then rework that same assignment. and it's going to move it up a level to where they are using AI for specified tasks as an assistant. And so it will say here each to research using the AI chatbots. And so that means me as a teacher, I'm going to have to create the chatbot in School AI and share with them. And so then you can keep going with it. You can say, okay, now same assignment, level two. And I would engage with it more if we had more time, but I'm going to say same assignment, level two, and just see only School AI, only School AI chatbots. It would probably remember that already, but I can just keep going, and this will help your teachers to kind of start processing how the assignments might change along that continuum, and how students might engage with them differently. I do want to be quiet for a moment and give you time to engage for just a couple of minutes with it. And if anybody has one they really want to share with us, there's a link at the bottom of that slide for a Padlet that you can drop it on. And then you could also just put it on the chat. But if you haven't done this before, in the upper right-hand corner of ChatGPT, there's a link to share a chat. And when you click that link, and this is what I recommend students do too, when you get to the point students are using AI, but I recommend, I don't know why it's being so slow, but it should very quickly give you a link that you can then submit to that Padlet or drop in the chat on this if you want to. Okay. And then you say create link, and then it will give you a link there and copy it. And so you could take that link and drop it into the chat on this if you want to, or if you would like to add it to that Padlet, there is a Padlet there that some other folks have added some links to, and you can certainly add yours there if you would like. You would just click the plus button on the lower right-hand corner. I would put your name maybe, and then this little link icon right here, and then paste that link in, and then hit enter, and then hit publish, and it will add it to this Padlet wall so other people can see it and engage with it. And we are coming up on time, so I promise to be quiet. I'm going to make myself be quiet for 2 minutes and let you play. Anybody wants to come off mute, and any revelations that you have or any concerns that you see, talk about what your assignments are turning out like, you're welcome to do that. And I'm just going to move through the other levels, which we've already kind of discussed. But this slide right here has where I've created some using that continuum for a grade 10 English class. And there are examples linked here. If this is a slide, a presentation that you might want to adapt for your staff, you're welcome to use those. And then there's another one here that I've done some environmental science examples, same way. And so just pointing those out, if you want to explore those further on your own, or if those might be useful to you in your work. And then this slide has a link here to the one that we're using. But if for some reason folks can't access that ChatGPT one, like maybe they're not allowed to create a ChatGPT account or something like that, I created the same thing in School AI, and it works pretty well as well. It's just not quite as advanced, but it does work. And so that would be one you could use also with folks who are not allowed to use ChatGPT, or for some reason can't. But GPTs are available to be used on the free version of ChatGPT now, that rolled out in their spring updates. But if you've exceeded your use of the free tool for the day, it may kick you out, and you may not be able to use it anymore if you use it multiple times. And so the School AI one is a backup if needed. And there's the Padlet, which we've already talked about. This is something I just like to share every time, just reminders. Again, when students are using it in particular, we need to make sure teach, model, reteach, and posting things like this around to remind them of how to use AI responsibly is a good idea. Evaluating it, verifying facts and figures, editing the prompt, revising the results, and then making sure they're responsible and they're disclosing their use. And so there's a link there to download that from AI for Education. I would recommend that. And I've also just shared this because it's AI for education as well. But they do have quite a few student prompts, which is also really good to help teachers kind of start thinking through how students might use AI in ways that are not cheating, in ways that are increasing their critical thinking and as a tutor. And so I would recommend exploring those student prompts as well because they do a really good job with that. And then we've talked about citations and modeling already. The disclosure statement is just very, very simple. But if you ever do need to cite it, MLA, APA, Chicago, all of those websites do have guidance on citing AI. It just normally for now does not work on the little quick tools that do citations for you. But if you have to do a formal research paper or something and you need to cite your use of AI, that will guide you in how to do that. Okay. This is just a couple of resources that I wanted to share. This is a lesson plan reflection created by somebody on our AI Collaborative last year, Katie Carmody, which if you've got teachers creating lesson plans, it's a really good tool to use to help them think through that. And this is something that a guy on LinkedIn shared that I adjusted a little bit, but it kind of has students thinking at each step of the writing process about how they may have used AI. And I do need to get to, that's how you make a copy of this presentation if you want to, but I do need to give you the webinar feedback because that's how you're going to get your certificate for participation today. And so if you don't mind to go to that, and I think I linked it so that it would just, let me drop it in the chat so you can get to it easily. But it is important that we do that so that you get your certificate, but also so that we get the feedback. So we would appreciate you doing that.